All right, everyone. This is Tiger Talk Thursday. We are on episode 52 of Transitioning to Life After Sports, and we have a longtime friend. He went to university with my brother, Kyle McLaughlin in the house. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a blast. It's good to see you.
I know. Honestly, I think in person, was I not like 15?
Yeah,
15
probably.
or 16 when I saw you? I've obviously been following your journey online. And for those of you that are brand new to Kyle's journey, he's a father of two, 18-year-old Finn and 16-year-old Will. He lives in Canmore, Alberta. He's a former hockey player. He went to St. Cloud State actually with my brother Brad. He's a minor hockey coach for his children's teams, was a skills coach, a true hockey coach ambassador, a junior A assistant coach. This resume is long, guys. I'm telling you, his track record is amazing. I can't wait to ask him more about this. Emergency medicine doctor in Canmore, Banff, medical director for Parks Canada Mountain Rescue, medical director Canadian Mountain Holidays Heliski, and medical staff for the Calgary Flames. But that's not enough because Kyle is also a four-time Ironman triathlon finisher. He did the Ironman double double, which we'll talk about it, but it's basically two Ironman races for those of you that don't know in 2 months. Unbelievable stamina mindset work there. He competed at triathlon world championships in Olympic distance, half Ironman, and Xterra off-road triathlon events. Did I pronounce those all right, Kyle?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
And he ran Boston Marathon twice. That alone is an accomplishment. I've done a marathon, but would never qualify for Boston. And including the year of the bombing, which we will talk about that experience. He's ran multiple ultra marathons, including Sinister Seven, which is a 100 miler, which he can let us know about. And 3 years ago, Kyle was diagnosed with stage 3 renal cell carcinoma, which for those of you that don't know, that's kidney cancer. And he had to surgically remove his right kidney. So here we are. Welcome, Kyle.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would clarify is I didn't actually remove my right kidney. I had someone
Yeah.
else do that.
Yeah,
But no, thanks.
exactly.
That's great.
No, for sure. Well, let's go back to your playing days. I mean, before obviously your long list of accomplishments and obviously on this series, it's I really have want to help those athletes that are suffering in silence. Not to assume that we all suffer when we leave sport, but when you do something long enough and it's so ingrained in you and it's such a major part of who you are, eventually when you leave, there is a transition that happens. But you tell us about your younger playing careers. Were you always into hockey? Like, how did you end up at St. Cloud? How did you end up as Brad's roommate?
Yeah, my greatest accomplishment in
I
sport
was
was rooming with your
rooming with
brother for
Brad.
4 years. Yeah. No, yeah, no. First off, I grew up in Nepean, Ontario. I mean, great sports town. I wouldn't say, just a hockey town. It's a great sports and great lacrosse town. I played both sports growing up. And like, I think, a couple of the other interviews you've had, I was always into lots of other sports. I had to make a decision at 16 about where I wanted to go, hockey or lacrosse.
Yeah.
I was looking at junior lacrosse, and I probably, in retrospect, I was probably a better lacrosse player than I was hockey. But I mean, the dream is to play hockey, and I got to play juniors in my hometown for the Nepean Raiders. I mean, we can go down the pathway of resiliency. Probably that was one of the earlier resiliency moments of my life was playing junior hockey. As a first year player, I was the eighth defenseman in the stands, and then through injury and players quitting, I made myself into the lineup. But I sat on the bench for I think it was 19 straight games without playing a shift, which I think is still a junior hockey record.
Let's talk about that because I think that's
Sure.
really important. And I find I talk to
Yeah.
a lot of athletes where they're frustrated they're not playing. Obviously, you see yourself, you know your potential, you see yourself in the lineup. And when I go to mindset coaching, I talk about, well, this is an opportunity for you to showcase your character, showcase that you want it regardless of the outcome. What was your experience like if you could put yourself back in that junior A body? And how did that change who you are today? So for some
Yeah.
young athlete that's going through it who's listening to this.
Totally. I mean, it's an absolute foundational moment, and I think, I mean, I use this story a lot with our junior team that I'm coaching in Canmore Eagles in the Alberta Junior League. I use this story every year at the right moment of just talking about, you know, difficult times will come, and that's one of the beauties of sport is that they'll expose you to challenging
Yeah.
moments, and it's all about how you whether you reframe it or whatever terms you want to use, that you're looking at that moment is it feels terrible at the time. But through some guidance, there are some great things you can learn from it. For me, I had a moment during that period of time where I wanted to quit, and I mean, I was in that moment because, as an eighth defenseman, but the seventh defenseman quit because he didn't want to be in the stands every game. And then unfortunately, one other player got hurt. So that's what put me in the lineup. So I was
Got
actually in
pumped
some
up.
sense,
I know you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
excited for anyone to get injured, but you're like, oh, it's game on.
And it's right. These things happen. And,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's like 5, 10, 15, 19 games where you're dressed and you don't play. That's a real hard thing to get
Mm,
through. And I remember
yeah.
my father, helping me through that process, and basically saying, like, well, it's your decision about what you want to do. But whatever you do, you're the one that's going to speak to the coach. At the
Mm,
time we didn't have agents like every
yeah.
player does now in junior
Yeah.
hockey. And but even if I did, it wasn't going to be the agent. It's going to be you talking to the head coach. My dad recognized that this was a great learning moment, and
Mm,
for me, I was fearful of the coach saying that, but also, I think one of the big things I didn't want to let my team down, even though I
yeah.
didn't see myself as making an impact in the game. I'm still part of the team, and that would have put them with 5 defensemen and made it really difficult. But in retrospect, it was the greatest thing for me to go through, is to have that resilience, and fight through the process. Just be harder working in practice. Come there, and my role changed. I'm a great cheerleader and teammate on the bench. I could serve penalties,
Yeah.
but I was a great team guy, and my moment came, and I knew that it would at some point. And then you slowly build in, and for me, if I could sum up my junior career, it went from being really, really hard, and then end up being a point a game guy in my third year, and I get a full scholarship to St. Cloud State, and I
Yeah.
get to play with your brother. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And that
yeah,
was the best part, right, Brad?
yeah, totally,
No,
yeah.
when you think about, I think about the long-term vision a lot. I mean, if there's one thing that I've always loved about myself is that ability to, I can sit through, well, we've done marathons and you've done
Mm-hmm.
Ironmans, and that there's something in someone's brain to be able to go the distance and see, I mean, 100 miler, that's quite impressive, but that would have been that's your first experience with that. Was there a movie? Was there a character? Was there a family member that really like ingrained that in you to look for the long-term vision of how this plays out? Like if you quit, did your dad explain that to you? If you quit now, these are your options, or you stick with it and you don't know what doors are going to open up.
Yeah, I think probably I think my dad was great as a parent. My parents were both really great parents, hockey parents, because they weren't they didn't get overly involved, and they let
You
it
gotta
be.
love the overly involved.
Yeah, totally. You see it way too often right now, and they let it be my experience, and
Mm,
obviously as a parent, they taught me many different things, and they probably, both of them, where they came from, they've experienced challenging times, and they also, like myself now, embrace those moments as really important lessons and important, in building your character.
yeah.
And I would say, like, if, using your example of, the endurance races and medicine in general, I would say the struggle, the hard, thing to get through medical school, and that, and then, part of my job as an emergency physician, you see bad things happen to good people every day.
Hmm.
I think over time, all of these things have led to, different moments of gaining resiliency, building grit, and then, also, build gratitude for what you have. I mean, I think everyone who's, say, we'll just bring up the cancer diagnosis. Some people look at that, and I mean, it's a really terrible thing to go through for anybody, absolutely. But there's also the gratitude of where I am right now, is I'm still alive.
Yeah.
There's gratitude at
Here,
finishing the finish
here.
line.
Cheers. I know
Yeah,
you, I know
yeah,
it too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cancer
absolutely.
survivors right here, both of
Yeah,
us. And
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
discriminate. That's when I knew what my mindset was bulletproof, because I remember when I was diagnosed and I was walking to the mailbox actually to go get the mail, and I remember looking up, and I'm sure you met my grandfather who
yeah.
called me
Oh yeah,
Tiger. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
Rolly
Rolly,
Goulet.
yeah, Rolly.
He needed his own bench to cheer for everyone, right? Going up and down. But I remember looking up and thinking, all right, this is the last piece of my puzzle to project me into what it is that I do now with the speaking and
Yeah,
working with athletes. As a younger person, I was kind of like, oh, it's one thing to be positive and motivated when you're 20, but you don't have life experience or things under your belt. No one really wants to listen to you, right? And my mom, I remember, well, you know, Sally and Lou, my mom
Oh
was
yeah.
like, I don't know what God you pray to, but I'm not thanking anyone for your cancer. But I had a deep, deep level of gratitude
Hmm.
because it forced me to reflect on parts of me that weren't working anymore, but there was just old systems that I needed to upgrade on my psyche type thing. But that resonates with me big time. What
Yeah.
did you, when you got your diagnosis, where were you? How
Yeah.
did you find it? I mean,
Yeah.
for those of you that are listening, we're jumping around from hockey right into cancer, but I love that you kind of just dove right into what it is, the topic that I'm very passionate about. It's transitions, it's trauma, it's things that life throws us that, and we're not prepared for, and the mindset behind it. So tell us about that part of your journey.
For sure. And you know, like, I mean, leading into that diagnosis 3 years ago, you know, I'm a healthy guy. I eat well.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I try to keep fit, and um, so
Let's just
I
run a
mean,
hundred miles.
well, at the time, yeah, I mean, I haven't raced ultra for a long time, but anyway, you know, yeah, for that was, I mean, it was an interesting story because we're just coming off of COVID, and from anyone who's in the medical care or in healthcare, or a physician, nurse, whatever, in frontline especially, it was trying times. You know, we were
Yeah.
tired, we were, you know, faced with a lot of
Overworked.
different things. Yeah, yeah, it was really, I mean, it was really challenging for sure. So I remember the time, you know, I was just mountain biking behind my house in Canmore. We live on the kind of bottom part of a mountain, so we're just riding this trail I've ridden 100 times, and then at the end of the trail, and I was about to ready to turn back, come back home, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine whose son was, you know, going through some stuff with tryouts and hockey, and he was trying to bounce some ideas off me. And
Mhm.
so I spent probably a little bit longer than I should have answering his questions, but just trying to help him out. And, you know, he's a good friend of mine. So, and also I looked at my watch, I'm like, oh, I gotta boot it back. Like I gotta get back hard, right? Because I gotta take the kids to tryouts or something. So I just put it in, you know, as hard as I could go, mountain biking back, and pretty loose dirt. Anyway, I ended up crashing my bike. I hit a tree, went over my handlebars, smacked my head, and I hit my leg, you know, right where my femoral artery is, and it really like expanded out. And I was like, oh, gee, I nicked my artery. Something's going on there. So it was just, you know, it stopped, and it wasn't bleeding out everywhere, but it was, you know, just kind of in the one area. So it's what we call a hematoma, just collection of blood under the skin. And so I went to the emergency department to get a CT scan to see if I've injured an artery. So it turned out I injured a small little branch off my femoral artery, but it clotted off, and that was fine. And then radiologist said to me, he says, "Hey, Kyle, do you know that you have I mean, have you ever been told you have a cyst on your kidney? You know, and a cyst is kind of like a fluid filled
Yep.
circular structure. You've heard of that with cystic breast cancer and stuff." So I was like, I never had any imaging on my kidney whatsoever, and I felt great. Not, you know, I'm not having any other signs of cancer whatsoever. You know, and a couple months later, a couple CTs and ultrasounds and biopsies later, I'm getting diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And I'm getting this pretty aggressive cancer that needs to get out pretty soon. So, but it was, you know, the story is really fascinating, you know,
Thank
and I
God he
think
called, because if you didn't fall, where would you be?
that's
Right?
it, you know, and you could track your brain through all these little things,
Yeah.
and if they didn't quite fit out, if the dominoes didn't lay as they did, you know, what would the outcome be? And you know, so I mean, always, again, you go back to gratitude. Like I'm grateful I crashed my bike. I'm grateful, you know, my buddy called me. You know, there's so many things that you could go through, because
Yeah.
if you didn't, even though it was a bad diagnosis, you know, for right now, I'm, you know, 3 years cancer free, and still getting image and stuff like that. But you know, the alternative outcome could have been a lot worse. So, but yeah, I mean, I think you can use a lot of that kind of an attitude in a lot of different things. You know, if you know, coming back to sport too, you know, for me in my situation I gave at the start, you know, I mean, there was gratitude. I'm on the bench, you know, even though it was
Yeah.
a bad situation, there's gratitude. You're in the game. You're
Yeah.
putting your gear on. You know, one of my best buddies at the time got cut, and he was playing junior B. He probably would have preferred to be in my position. Maybe, I don't know. Hard to say,
Yeah.
but and I think that's a lot of reframing when things are challenging, right? You
Yeah.
could
I think
always find
it's
gratitude.
Yeah, it really is that appreciation piece, which I remember growing up, my mom
Mm-hmm.
always would speak that into us, and where we've had to focus our energy, and she was always the one helping, right? So you focus on like
Mm-hmm.
the good and the helping, so that was ingrained. Because I remember a deep sense of gratitude myself when I was at UNH. And I'll never forget, I was like, went from first line to fourth line and was like, what the heck? But instead of sulking about it, I marched into the coach's office and said, what do I need to do differently? Took the feedback and applied it. And guess what? Worked my way back up. And that's ebbs and flows in the
Yeah.
playing career. But to me, what sticks out in your experience is the resiliency to see it through. And I've said this before on another series, but I've always loved the saying, you sit around a barbershop long enough, eventually you're going to get a haircut. And I felt that way with a lot of the things that I do, with like keep showing up. And you don't know when, you don't know how, but there is going to be a window and you got to be ready to jump through it, right? If it's just a
Yeah.
sliver or if it's a wide open door. So you end up at St. Cloud.
Yeah.
You were the captain there, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you have like, you're in pre-med, you're playing, so there's also a lot of NCAA athletes or athletes at the higher level that watch this, and juggling
Mhm.
sport, and I hear that a lot, like the time commitment. You want to be out with your friends, but then you've got to study for a test and you're on the road. What was that like for you? How did you juggle it? What advice would you have for any athletes that are maybe going through that now?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, college sports is one of the greatest
Yeah.
learning environments in general. Being a student athlete, I give these kind of discussions with our junior players all the time. Is that it is a challenge, and you learn time management, and you learn to prioritize. And the interesting thing I always find is that we the student athletes. They often get it right. I mean, they've got an out. Instead of partying, on a Tuesday night, you always have an out because you got practice, you got expectations, and I think the culture has probably changed quite a bit in 30 years since I was playing college. But,
I think initiation's a little bit different now.
yeah, yeah, and I would say too, like, I mean, even going back to St. Cloud and talking to well, Jeremiah Minkel, who was our equipment manager for Brad and I, my last year, he just retired last year, I believe, from there. So he'd been there for like the last
Wow.
30 years. And talking to him about how things have changed. So there is a little bit of a change culture, but I think the one thing that doesn't change is you got lots of responsibility. You got to be in class and you got to do well in class.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah, or you lose
take
your
care of.
scholarship, right?
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you got to take care of your body, and you got to be good on the ice. You got to be good off ice. Then you have to deal with all the mental stuff that every college student has to go through. Breaking up with a boyfriend, girlfriend. Losing a family member, being homesick, all those other things. So, I mean, I don't know if there's too many, learning environments that are more pure than playing college sport and being a student athlete. The other thing too is your support structure is immense in college.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, again, we
It's
bring
like
up
an
Brad
insta
all the time.
family. You get on campus and you're like, hey, 20 some
That's it.
teammates, coaches, you've got nutritionists, all the things, therapists. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I mean, outside of, I still keep in touch with all the teammates. Like I was just saying before the recording, I just, drove through. I talked to your brother yesterday or 2 days ago. So,
Yeah.
we keep in touch, and the teammates keep in touch. But it's even like, I still talk to our athletic director,
Yeah.
and so these relationships that you build and the support that you have while you're there. So I would say, as far as advice goes, I think, like be a competitor in the dressing room, on the ice, but also in the classroom,
Yeah.
and compete like you do on the ice when you're in a classroom. That's a really important part. But also lean on your supports while you're there. And one thing I was going to mention later, or at some point on this, for me, a big thing throughout all these little steps and little stages that I've gone through is the value of mentorship,
Mm,
and
yeah.
the for helping you through. And I had our team doc was a big mentor to me in college hockey, and it kind of guided me away from orthopedic surgery into. He knew that I was probably a better emergency medicine physician, and he mentored me through that. We had seniors on our team when Brad and I were freshmen that were mentors to all of us, and then we got that opportunity in my last year when I was captain. At times I tried to be a mentor, and times I had to be a disciplinarian to some of the
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
But you also, like, just like you said, learning those lessons about how to speak to adults, going into a coach, asking, like, rather than making excuses and
Well,
having
it goes
someone
back
else
to your
fight your
dad
butts.
telling you you got to have the
Yeah,
conversation yourself, and that's a big. I've
that's
I've
it.
interviewed some NCAA coaches that I have actually played with, and that was one of my friend Jackie's biggest piece of advice. She's like, send your kids in, don't come talk to me. Like from the parents'
Yeah,
point of view, it's like you're
yeah,
teaching them how to have a crucial conversation. They're nervous, that anxiety that they feel, they'll still get to feel it, but they'll have a confidence to have it in any time, whether it's on or off the ice or whatever sport arena you're in. But I think
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
huge one for athletes watching.
absolutely.
Challenge yourself to have the difficult conversation on or off the ice with family, with friends, with
Yep,
because that's what's holding you back from going on to that next level. Otherwise, you're just in your head all the time, right?
that's it.
Um,
That's it. And it's
I
often
like,
not as bad as you think it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Well, you think about when you hold it in, it's this little thing that goes doo, 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 and then when you
yeah,
get it out, it just dissipates, right? So
yeah.
having that clearing is so important. One thing you touched on when you were talking about the support and networking, I can't tell you as someone, I'm 42. So what are you, 45, 46,
48 now. 48.
48? What? Brad's
Yeah,
only 4 years. I'll be
yeah.
43. Oh yeah. I
Brad's
can't
one
do
year
math. Brad
younger.
is 4 years. Okay.
Yeah,
But I was thinking about how many people, so for those of you watching, younger athletes, young or old, I forgot about. I mean, I always was a connector. I was someone who always kept in touch. I genuinely liked the cleaning ladies and the support of the staff and the front desk, and I genuinely would check in on them when Facebook came around, and that was just something
mm,
with who I am. And when you're saying you're keeping in touch with everyone, but I more in my 40s now, that networking that I didn't know that I was doing
yeah.
has just been pivotal in my access to athletes for my interviews, in my access to opportunities. They know my character and they trust me. So then it opens a door for, hey, you need to meet so and so. Like I actually just called Coach Mac, Brian McCluskey, who's one of my coaches at UNH. And I just said, and a wonderful mentor for me when I was there as well. But I called him and just said, this is what I'm working on. These are my goals. Who do I need to know?
Yeah.
I'll always ask, who do I, and then I go, would you mind interviewing? Sorry, would you mind introducing me? And
Yeah.
then they'll do a blind intro, and I never know where that door is going to go. But those people you're playing with, like, be interested in those relationships. Be interested in the people working for your team. Be interested in the people helping, volunteering. You never know, and it's more so now. And again, I did it genuinely, and it sounds like you did it without knowing along your path as well. But would you not say that some of those relationships have come back with opportunities for
Oh,
you?
well, yeah. I mean, obviously, they all come back with the relationships and the experience and the memories and
Yep.
going back and having really good times. But I mean, it's somewhere along the line. I remember I had where's one of my captains or something in juniors, and I remember him telling me just always thank the bus driver. And I
I
I
love
use
that.
that as a really I mean, that's a really good little thing across the world, or whatever you do. Like I mean, some of our closest friends in juniors and in college hockey were our equipment managers because
Mhm.
they worked so hard, and our bus driver, or, like,
Yeah.
and I think just across the, like, in the hospital, we make it a point, I make it a point and I try to model it that you go and you thank everybody who's working in your department. The person who's worst job in the emergency department is cleaning up the beds and stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
So cleaning staff and and I think that's just how do you want to be treated, and I think sometimes athletes get glorified probably a little bit too much, and it's really good to be grounded and just treat everybody really well, and ultimately, like you said, like you can benefit for sure. Like people look back
Yeah.
and like I said, I still talk to our athletic director. I had good conversations with a couple of my professors, up until a few years ago, and even one of the sports writers in St. Cloud. Like every once in a while, I just get a message from them too. Like they just, and maybe it's a reflection of how you were as a person. Actually, probably more so as a person than you as a player, because you can
Well,
look at my stat
exactly.
line.
Yeah.
But I didn't pop many goals, that's for sure. Yeah.
No, but you definitely have leadership qualities. I mean, look at the journey that you've been on. And you've done some great work for raising money through your Ironmans. Tell us a little bit. Okay, tell me about this double double and how the heck did you do that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, I mean, I think, like, going back to a couple of things that you said, we talked about gratitude. You talked about one time, like, you asked me about, some of the motivation or some of the things you think about, and so, um, when I think maybe I'm thinking back like maybe 2009 or something like that. I was just getting into Ironman distance triathlons, and I got introduced to who ended up being one of my, still to this day, one of my really good friends, a guy named Blaine Penny, whose son was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease. And mitochondrial disease, for those, many people don't know, even
I
physicians
don't know
aren't
what it
really
is.
that familiar. Yeah, so the mitochondria are the tiny little things in our cells that create energy, basically
Okay.
as simple as it gets. And then you can have a mitochondrial disease is a collection of genetic disorders that cause some dysregulation or dysfunction of these mitochondria. Sometimes the kids are born with problems, and sometimes it's hidden until you get a large uh, physiologic stress or large stress on the body. So that was, my friend's son, Evan Penny, who at 4 years old, they unearthed this mitochondrial disease that he had. He became a paraplegic and had lots of difficulties. And so when Blaine was in our running community, he's actually an incredible runner, and we ran lots of races together, lots of events, lots of really cool adventures that we've done running, and including the way we did the Boston Marathon at the bombing that year as well. But long story short, when I heard about Evan, and Blaine was just starting a charity called Mito Canada, which is
Mm-hmm.
raising
Yeah.
fundraising, raising awareness, and just basically trying to spread the word for mitochondrial disease. I thought it would be a really cool thing to get behind and try to help. It resonated with me because our kids were very similar in age at the time, and we were both, Blaine and I were just good athletes at the time and racing and doing a lot of things. And then we had all this huge mutual community in Calgary, and actually ended up being across Canada and North America. That running for a purpose seemed like the right thing to do. So we started a fundraising concept called Team Mito Canada, which is basically using sport as a vehicle to raise awareness. So
Yeah.
we designed jerseys and shirts and swag, and we built this team of Team Mito athletes. And we would go and basically go right to the starting line, right in front of everybody else, where the first shot gets took at the race start. And oftentimes we'd end up on the podium with our stuff. And so we, through that, one of the fundraisers that I did was I wanted to raise, I think it was $15,000 for Mito Canada. And I was signed up for Ironman Coeur d'Alene, and I was signed up for Canada, and I was going to choose, if I was ready for Coeur d'Alene in June, I was going to do that one because I was trying to qualify for World Championships. And if I wasn't quite ready, I was going to drop that and then get ready
Yeah.
for Canada 2 months later. So long story short, I said, I dashed that. This is more important. And I said, well, I'll do, it's two Ironman in I think it was 6 weeks or something. So I think one was the end of early July, another one was like mid-August at the time. So anyway, I just did that, and I just tried to spread the word about it. Did a lot of training, did a lot of
Where does that love?
blogging.
So
Mm-hmm.
obviously you have a
Mm-hmm.
great reason to run and purpose for
Yeah,
it's Mito Canada. So for people
yeah,
listening, Mito, Mito.
that's correct. Yeah,
Okay. What talk to me? I'm very fascinated with mindset and the drive,
yeah.
and where did you cultivate and nurture this part of you that can go the distance of what is it called? Sinner seven, or what was it called? Sinner.
Yeah, Sinister Seven. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
100
like
mile. Yeah,
who sits there and is like, I can't. I mean, even when I decided to do a full marathon, I mean, I did mine. I'm not bad. 4 hours and 19 minutes in the pouring rain. My mom followed me all around Ottawa in her car. I could see her
yeah.
following me. But I mean, 100 miler. That's where. Talk to me about the process in your mind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not something that grows overnight. That's for sure. I mean, I went from being a 215-pound hockey player to I ran my first marathon while I was in med school. So about 3 years after that, and I just lost a lot of weight, and my body is a little bit better at 185 pounds. But
Yeah.
anyways, there's the process there, and then over a period of time, got into various different sports and endurance of it. But I think from the mindset standpoint, I mean, it's just
So
something
for
that really,
somebody watching,
yeah.
would that
Mm-hmm.
has that is your first piece of advice change your physiology, do lose the weight, like because along that journey
Hmm.
you're going to develop your mind, obviously, because you're sticking with the consistent,
Yeah.
disciplined, new lifestyle habits with
Yeah.
food, whatever. That was your first piece that you started to develop that part of you, and then you could see further vision, I am assuming, for yourself as you started to
Yeah.
get in better shape.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple things there was, like it happened, the training and the start of changing who I was as an athlete. I mean, it started when hockey ended for me. So I went from St. Cloud State and, I went right into medical school. And so
How
at
was
that
that for
time,
you? Like, what was
yeah,
that? Because that life after sports, I mean, you jumped right into kind of another big challenge for you, though. So
yeah,
mentally, sometimes when we don't, I find like any athletes that I've interviewed, some people go right into reporting, so they don't feel the loss of
yeah.
the sport because they're still engaged in it. But did you have a moment where you were like, "What am I doing?" Or because you were thrown into the thick of medicine, you didn't really have time to focus on it.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty well aware of post competition depression and the struggles because I had, you play college level hockey, you're going to know lots of people that play pros. And I think at one point I joked that I had played against or with someone on every NHL team, you know, and but
Well, you're the
I had
NHL and the doctor in the medicine world.
yeah, yeah, but you know what? I was also starting to experience two guys I'd played with in juniors that are 4 years older than me that had quit and then struggling to find their way when they're done, and
Hmm.
and what is their purpose when they're done, and who am I, and all the stuff that that is, I think, the heart of a lot of what you're doing right now. It is all over the place, and no matter what sport you're in, right? It's a real tough transition. I've heard some of your former interview said it's like going like 100 miles an hour to zero,
Yeah.
and right off the bat. So for me, like it was a really easy transition from, you do school, and then for St. Cloud we were at the rink from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock every day, and then you studied at nights and hung out with your friends or whatever. But for me, I just went right into med school where
Hmm.
I mean, it was, if I thought college hockey hours were long, like that,
Yeah.
med school is a grind. It's tough. So I never really had that moment of like, I knew I was a hockey player and a student athlete, and then boom, I'm a
Yeah.
medical student.
Mm.
And so I was really fortunate in that sense, but I was also cognizant of how my friends had struggled with their transition to who they were. I mean, I was
Well, a lot of
fortunate I
it's
had
around
had a degree.
identity for
It is,
athletes,
yeah,
right? Hmm.
totally,
And you
totally. And
walked
it was
into a whole new identity that you can embrace that you were working towards. That's kind of the benefit of your major,
absolutely,
actually, because I
yeah,
had a teammate, Allison Egger, and she did med school. And I remember seeing her run from the hockey rink, run over, like, and you'd see her running. We'd be finishing something and maybe it'd be optional to stay on or something. You'd see her running up the stadium, running up the
yeah,
arena, whatever, the
yeah.
stairs, because
Stands,
she's
yeah,
going out the top to go out to class. And
yeah,
because there was a class on that side. Anyways, I just remember her always running, and she sure enough fulfilled her career in
yeah,
medicine and stuff like that. But I definitely
yeah,
see the identity issue, because you had that for you to focus on. It
yeah,
really rounds you as a person, right? So when you leave
yeah.
sport, all your eggs aren't in one basket.
Well, totally, and I knew it was coming. Like, I got my
Yeah.
acceptance prior to the end. I kind of, I mean, I did try to defer for a couple of years to try to go play a little bit of pro,
Yeah.
but I don't know if my marks were good enough to to defer. But no, I mean, and I think so I had that quick transition, and I knew, I kind of had, I was cognizant of it, and I was really busy during school. But you also, you learn how to grind, and learn how to develop resiliency. Junior hockey, college hockey, and then medicine. It's a mental resilience practice as well.
Yeah.
And then the natural progression to me, just kind of going back to the sport bit, was I I liked the challenges. I enjoyed that. I love trying new things, and like the common thing that
I'm
happens to
in
me
med
every,
school. I might as well go
yeah,
run a marathon while I'm
yeah,
at it.
totally. But it was really cool because my wife, well, Carrie, my girlfriend, we got married during that period of time. But who we met in St. Cloud. We we were running together, so that was a really
Okay,
cool
cool.
kind of thing. And she's probably the one, if I could think back correctly, I think she was the one that got me into running at the time, and then she got me into triathlon, and then part of that too. A funny story was in 2005, I went to my first Ironman because Carrie's racing team, triathlon team in Nova Scotia, a bunch of them were doing their first Ironman in Penticton. and we went to go cheer him on. And at that time, I couldn't swim. Like I couldn't swim 25 meters. And I just was so taken back by the emotion of seeing these people like working
Mm.
so hard and coming in after, 15 hours and it's midnight and we're cheering these people on. And if anyone ever has an opportunity to go cheer the finishers of the last hour at Ironman Canada and Penticton, like it's a mind blowing experience. And
Yeah.
it was enough for me to say, well, let's go take a risk and do something that's really hard for me was swimming. And over the next couple of years, dedicated myself to that again, trying to recreate myself again and become an adequate swimmer so I can get through the swim of an Ironman, and then I could bike and I could run, and I just kind of slowly build
Yeah.
all that stuff up. But even like circling back around to the mindset that you mentioned, like some of the hardest things I've done, with the Ironman, with the Sinister Seven. Another one that was really challenging. We did. It's kind of a popular thing to do now, but about maybe 10 years ago, we did rim to rim to rim in Grand Canyon. So we go south rim down all the way to north rim, then come back and do south rim. I think it's something like 75 to 80 kilometers and tremendous amount of elevation gain because you're at the top
Oh
rim and
yeah.
then you drop down to the bottom. And
This is at the Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon, yeah.
My memory of the Grand Canyon, and if Lou Goulet is watching, is him strapping bottles of water to Brad, Danielle, and I, and we're watching everybody go by on camels or something, and we're the camels
Yeah,
with Lou's water
yeah,
way
yeah,
back down
totally.
to the plateau. Yeah,
I'm
too
I'm
funny.
sure I'm sure Lou crushed that. That'd be right up his alley.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
But and I think some of those really hard things I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed those moments where they were, like you have that little, little figure on your shoulder telling you to quit, and you're like, there's no possibility of it. I don't like. There's an old saying in endurance sport that just says, "Embrace the suck."
Yeah,
And so for me, I sometimes think that that's maybe there's a little bit of an addictive personality kind of there that jumps out that I like that. Like I really
yeah.
enjoy it. And a lot of the endurance athletes I talk to, that's really they
Oh
love
yeah,
those
there's a
moments where
runner's
they could
high.
quit.
There's a yeah.
Yeah,
It's you
yeah,
can't. I mean, at least your addiction is to something healthy,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
totally. Yeah.
What I'm curious because the list of accomplishments is long. You're clearly highly driven. Your mental game seems intact, but you are human. You're not perfect, right? None of us are. Um, when was there a moment in time that you really struggled mentally, emotionally, physically behind closed doors? You know that this inner, for me, it's the tiger, this inner part of you exists, and you're definitely powered by the human spirit. I can feel it and I can see it
Mm-hmm.
in your images.
Mm-hmm.
But when have you had a moment where you just behind closed doors are like, I can't do this?
Yeah. Yeah. I could tell you like the last major race that I did up until actually, well, not really a major. I'm racing in Moab. I got a 3-day run in next week. And but I haven't actually
Just a
raced.
small 3-day run.
Yeah. Well, it's not that
I know.
it's not that bad, but it's kind of cool. It's my friend's 50th birthday, who's the race director. So shout out to Kevin McDonald to Huda if he ever watches this. But anyway, they so my last significant race was the World Championships off road triathlon Xterra in Maui, and I'd spent like a great time with my kids. They were growing up. They were probably about maybe 7 and 5 at the time.
Yeah.
And so I spent a really good amount of time with them during the beach. And I was still training leading up to the race. And I had that great feeling at the start of every race that everyone knows. It's just like such excitement. And every race I've done, even through the hard things, there's still some enjoyment, some fun in it. But
Yeah.
I can remember getting off my bike and knowing I got to run like, 6K up and 4K down this grindy, dusty, and I was like, I'm not having fun anymore. I want
Mm,
to be on the beach with my kids, and so it
yeah.
wasn't necessarily like a low moment, like I felt like failure. It was just like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm gonna finish this off. I'm gonna give my kids a hug, and then we're gonna go to the beach and go have some fun. And so I think like a lot of friends I talk to, there is a moment usually when you're getting more engaged with your kids' activities, and for me it was a transition point to, to be honest, it's don't be a selfish endurance athlete anymore, and
Yeah.
be a great mentor for your kids. And that's where I transitioned more into coaching at that
Yeah.
point. Got back into coaching hockey and trying to help my kids, with their passion.
Well, and
Yeah.
something that I said it in your bio, but we didn't really
Mhm.
touch upon, and now you're doing medical stuff. You're on the bench with the Calgary Flames. I mean, talk about a full circle hockey career, and now you're to experience the NHL in a whole other arena, but through something you're passionate about. And I talk to
Yeah.
athletes a lot about, you might think hockey's for you, but look at where you're in the NHL for a different reason,
Totally.
as a support, but you're still there. And we never know when we just like, if you're feeling pulled towards medicine, or if you're feeling pulled to another interest, you never know how that's going to come back around. Right. And
Totally.
I had parked my hockey playing days. I hadn't really talked about it for a while until when I landed my
Mhm.
TEDx talk and they wanted to really pull out the life after sport arena. So that really made me go down that memory lane.
Yeah.
But you really don't know what parts of the puzzle you're putting together when you're younger. And as you get older, it's really neat to see how it's like, oh, that's why we did that. And that's why we did that. Right. And that's the curiosity piece that I always encourage people,
Uh,
stop trying to control and manipulate everything. Just keep showing up and see what happens. Right.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think like just kind of writing down a few little things before I got on here, but one of the major lessons I've learned is that curiosity is such a um, underestimated important characteristic of living and growing and teaching your kids, and should be a part of education all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the um, curiosity, removing fear from doing things that might seem risky, or I really shouldn't do that, or I'm not really sure.
Hmm.
Like a lot of the things that I've fallen into, like these titles that I have and stuff like that. It's hey, that sounds kind of cool. Like you get like
Yeah.
someone offers
Yeah.
it to you,
You
and you're
just
like,
try
oh,
it.
hey, that sounds kind of cool. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think I've learned, like, I've got a couple of friends who are highly successful entrepreneurs who do endurance sports, and I run and train with them, who've taught me these things in the past, where it's like, don't fear it failing,
Yeah.
or it not working, because you're going to gain the lessons that will help you to your next thing. And then you can always walk away. And I've even, looking at these little pocket stages that I have, and I consciously will look every 4 years to try to recreate myself somehow. And that's how I've kind of, I still, there's things I've started. I did sports medicine for a number of years, and then kind of dropped that. It wasn't really my bag. It was okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. But
Yeah.
then I fall into the Flames. I get an offer with that, and this is, like I was joking with you before, I think I'm on my sixth head coach with the Flames now. I think I still have my first check from them, because at 36 I got my first paycheck from the NHL.
Yeah. Well, there you go. See, it
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
back around. It was a goal of
that's it.
yours, but you didn't see. But sometimes we have the vision and the goal, but you don't know why it's there, right? And there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
What an
totally.
accomplishment, though. I mean, you've
Yeah,
done so much. I mean, when I read your list of accomplishments, it's like your time management must be pretty freaking phenomenal. Are you an early riser? You must be an early riser.
yeah. You know what, I do shift work, so which makes
Okay.
it really challenging
Yeah, like when do
to
you
to
get a
stick to a
100
schedule.
20-mile run in just to get some
Yeah.
distance in for your practicing? How do you
Yeah, I
manage
mean,
that?
there are some hidden benefits of being an emergency doctor. Is like, it is shift work, but you only do, like, for us, it's 14 8-hour shifts a month. So really, it's not that onerous. And the nice thing is for us, like, I'll start work at 3:30 in my afternoon shift, so I've got all day to do whatever I want to start.
Yep.
It was really beneficial when the kids were young too, because I got to spend more time with them. But now as I get older, I'm like, pushing 50, and I got to do night shifts, and that's hard.
Yeah.
um, but no, I mean, I think I mean, yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, I love being up in the morning. I think when there's a regular schedule, I love getting up and, do the most important thing of the day first off.
Great
Take
advice.
care. Yep, take care of your body right off the bat. Drink lots of water at the start, and and just learn something off the bat. I think I've got a good friend of mine who, there's a short little podcast. I don't want to promote any specific podcast, but it's a short little podcast. It's
Oh,
like a
it
five
doesn't
to
matter.
ten minute,
Share it. So if it can help our listeners, what is it called?
totally, totally Daily Stoic.
Yeah, the Stoic.
Um,
I think I've heard of that. I've heard other people
yeah,
say that. Yeah.
Really good, really good.
Yeah,
So I got
for
one of
sure.
my good friends who's a CEO of a company, and his routine is very strict. Every morning, he's journaling. You know, he's exercising. He takes a
Oh, you're
moment of
speaking my language.
it's
Sometimes I'm like, do you meditate? Are you into meditation?
yeah, I studied a little bit of Buddhism for a little while,
Very
and
cool.
and Carrie, you might not know this, but over COVID, Carrie became a yoga instructor. So my wife Carrie,
Very cool.
and so we do that. I mean, I don't meditate near as much as I used to, and but you know what I find is when I run or when I
It's
bike, especially
your
running, for
active
me,
meditation.
it's it. Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
it's I've achieved flow state more often in running than I have in any other thing, and it's running in the mountains. It's just
Yeah.
the environment and just getting that flow state. And so for me, when I can do that, you know, or if I have a lot on my plate, go for a run, and I usually find in those moving meditative moments, the rhythm, the going through the woods, especially like there's lots of science behind that. For mood stabilization, being in
I love
nature,
that.
yeah. But it's you know for me that's I solve a lot of problems when I'm doing that. I don't think I'm unique by that by any means. I think this is something I've
Some
heard
of
from
my
somebody
best
else.
ideas come when I'm working out. My husband gets so
Yeah,
annoyed. He's like, "Put your phone away." I'm like, "I'm having an idea," and I'm just texting
that's it.
it to myself, and I'm usually
Yeah,
writing it down because I'm working out, and that's when my best ideas come as well. It's interesting
so
because if you
true.
go back to sports and you talked about,
Mm-hmm,
the great experience of a student athlete and having the
mm-hmm,
schedule, and you have to say no to going out on Tuesday because you've got
mm-hmm,
practice and you've got all these things, and you're regimented. That is also the benefit of an early morning routine because
mm-hmm.
not bad decisions happen at night.
Oh yeah,
You eat shitty, you go out, you drink, you
yep.
stay up too late, whatever. And then it's a domino effect. So I think about the importance. I love early morning. I'm an early morning routine, journaling, meditation, working
Mm-hmm,
out, all before the kids' priority, right? I mean, do I nail it every day? No. I had
yeah.
a couple years off, obviously, with breast cancer, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, when that is in check, everything else is flowing really well.
It
So,
it's amazing, isn't it? You know, and I think too that the hard part I've found over the years is getting that consistency of doing it.
mhm.
With a chaotic schedule, it's really hard.
Yeah.
But even you know, like we had a period where Carrie and I, when we were racing triathlon, we were going through different diets to see. Part of it was losing weight, but there's also part of it is how do you feel with different diets.
Hmm.
And even if you look at diet alone, if you go, you know, your New Year's resolutions, you know, they always end in about 10 days, right? So,
They
but
end January 2nd.
yeah, yeah. But, you know, for us, we dedicated a month. I mean, it might not even, I think the science shows like 3 months is probably better for
Yep.
changing of habits. But for us, we dedicated a month at a period of time. We're going to keep, you know, changing diets. And we went from everything from paleo to vegan raw and everything in between. So
Yeah.
we found for us a diet that really worked really well. And during that period, it was really hard to knock the consistency. And, you know, with a lot of different things, especially like, you know, raising a family like you're doing right now. Like we're empty nesting right now for the first time, which is a wild thing.
I'm
So we're
sure.
yeah, yeah. So our routines are all a little bit different now too. But you know, I think that's a really important thing that goes along with the journaling, the meditation, the doing the most important things first. Take care of your body first in the morning. You know, is sticking to a program. And I think, from what I understand from the science, it's 3 months is probably the ideal thing. Like that it'll get locked in at that point,
Yeah.
as long as nothing else really changes. Um, but I think there's some really good value with that. And I think the other thing that's it's an underappreciated thing is sleep. I
Yeah.
think in this society of go go go,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
mean, and I'm not the best person to talk to about that. I sleep when I can, but
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm learning, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get better at is dedicating getting better at quality of sleep and duration of sleep. And you know, I think the science behind recovery is very clear right now. There's a reason why Whoop and all those, you know, Orvo and all those devices are sleep tracking now, and
Mm.
it's. I think that's one of the things. If I look back into my hockey career, if I could have done better, is my recovery, and having
Yeah.
my kids going through this process right now.
Yeah.
My older son had committed to university for college hockey, and so we went through some of the visits with them, seeing the new programs focus on recovery is incredible. I wish we had
Wow.
that back in the day, 30 years ago, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think
I
that's
know
a really really
technology.
important thing. Mm-hmm.
I know. So, if you were to read a book, what are you currently reading right now?
Oh yeah, I got a really cool book right now called, I believe it's called The Outsider.
Okay.
It's about an ultra running older Kermit in the Okanagan Valley. It's a true story. But I dive around a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I love. I just kind of read
Because you're
Winning.
curious.
That's it. That's it. Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's exactly it. Like, what do I want to learn about? I usually have a book on my bedside that's fun adventure type stuff. I love that. And then there's also something that's going to make me better. And the sports psychology is kind of what I'm into right now. And learning, I'm trying to, as a coach and as a parent, I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn how people learn. And as an educator, I know I teach in our hospital a lot and with our students, and so how can I be a better teacher and educator by learning how people learn? And I think
Yeah.
that's the new frontier of coaching, in my opinion. Is we as coaches have to be better teachers.
Yeah, it's not just get on the line, give me, and
No,
that's changed. Well, you see the mental health need for kids is such a, I mean, whether it's more spoken about, but also the way that we live our lives on devices versus being
yeah,
outside and just throwing rocks, at the
yeah,
park, has changed the name of the game. And isolation is happening a lot more because of devices,
yeah,
because of technology. You can't go knock on your friend's door. You pick up the phone or you text them. You don't even have to call. Like our younger kids, we're on the kids, you have to pick up the phone and call. You have to call. You got to
yeah.
look them in the eye. Like we're very big on that. So I see that. Well, I mean, your journey's phenomenal. What I love about you, Kyle, is your curiosity and your
Mm-hmm.
willingness to try something on. I feel like I'm kind of a yes girl. I landed, I was on set for a movie for like 5 days. I was only supposed to be there for one. Greg was like, "Where are you?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll be back in 16 hours." He's like, "Where is she now?" Honestly, half the time his friends or family sometimes ask what I'm up to. He's like, "I don't even know." I mean,
Yeah.
he's just learned to let me like run with whatever Janine is running with. I'm a very um curious person. I'm a grateful person. So I really resonate
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of things because I can see it in you, and the networking part and I mean gratitude and curiosity. If those are those are some really great pillars to stand on and build a life around. So for young athletes and that are going through this. I know we've spoken for a while and I mean you've just spent so much
Mm-hmm.
information. You've got such a dynamic story. Was there anything I didn't ask that you're like, man, I really want these athletes to know? Again, I think about the people watching that I've really been
Yeah.
trying to target and it's like I know of athletes that are struggling in silence. And you've been lucky to have that internal drive. Again, I really feel like you're powered by the human spirit because you are curious. You've got these leadership qualities. You're afraid, embrace the suck. All the things are embedded in you. But for that one person that's stuck in their
Mm-hmm.
head or doesn't know what to do, what would you tell them if they were standing in front of you or they're sitting there watching this?
Yeah. I mean, I think for the post competition transition, I mean, I mean, as a physician, I hear you. Like it's such a, man, it's a big deal, and I think we're starting to recognize it. So, I mean, the couple of things I think I've learned is that if right off the bat, you can't change the competitive spirit of an athlete, right? Like you can't and I think what ends up happening is part of the hurt is that we don't have an outlet for that competition, that compete spirit. So I think it's really important to find something that you
Hmm.
can compete with. And whether
Yeah.
that's an athletic endeavor or an academic or a spiritual endeavor, or
Yep.
I think that's a
Even
really important
creative.
piece.
Some of
Oh,
some of the
100%.
athletes like they go into photography or like I think about sitting
Absolutely.
at a desk.
Yeah.
My day job, I'm with a company called Sunrise Medical, but I'm on the
Yeah.
road all the time. I mean, I couldn't be a better job for me just because it's
Yeah.
constantly changing. I have to be creative. I've got to think on the spot. I'm dealing with wheelchair and
Yeah.
accessibility people, and I absolutely love it. But it's that creative
Yeah.
piece that I always say with athletes. So yeah, that
I,
really resonates with me.
yeah, I think it's huge. And part of that is, just like you're saying, is knowing who you are and
Mm.
knowing what makes you tick, and try to replace the time that you would, and the focus, because you need that. And I think that's
Yeah.
important for moving forward, because the people that get into trouble that I've experienced is when you don't have that outlet, and then whether it's bored or you lack purpose or what it is, then you start going down destructive habits and destructive
Correct.
movements. So that's one thing. I think the next thing is the curiosity piece. I'll just keep going with that. I think that's a really good theme that's come out of this talk. And you know, a lot of people will say, well, like, how do I get started? You know, like how,
Yeah.
like I'm like, how, what am I curious about? I would just start with what makes you happy. You know,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just kind of like, you know, finding, you know, your own person and stuff like that. But what makes you happy? And I don't be afraid to try new things. Like
Yeah.
say yes to some things that you might be like,
Yeah.
just go try it, see what happens, because oftentimes it'll lead to something, I find. um you know, and I think I just got a couple of little notes I had right down here because I was thinking about this. But oh yeah, so the one thing, I think this is
I
something
love
that
that you
I've,
have notes.
well, I just
That's
was
a
thinking
very
about it today.
Kyle fashion, I
Well,
think.
you know, I watched your TED talk when I went for a run this morning, and I saw your interview with Bickle, and
Oh yeah,
you know, so
Brian.
it got me thinking about a few things. But I think this is really, like, it's something that you know, I've had friends go through this. I've had lots of friends, and even now with the hockey community, you see it. You know, and our kids are growing up, you know, and I'm worried
Yeah.
about them sometimes too. But I think one thing that I've learned about those curiosity moments, and going after things, just saying yes to, is don't try to seek a perfect moment. Like, don't
Mm.
like, this
Yeah.
is not quite right, this is not
Yeah.
perfect. You'll never find something that's
No.
perfect, right? Just you know, go and experience something, and just try, just for the sense of experiencing it. And then the last thing I had, like, I kind of, I was thinking about this before, was is you know, if you had a whole selection of cups of things that are important to you in your life.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually part of this cup thing came from something you said about your cup overflowing, you know,
Hmm.
and let the other people around you get the overflow from your cup. So I just thought about, like, for me, if I can categorize the things in my life that are important, and they're all cups.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking to make a transition, you want to be able to fill as much of those cups up as possible, because I think the oftentimes what happens, we get into trouble when the cup that we had that was really full at one point in our life all of a sudden gets dumped because
Uh,
it's changed,
Yeah.
and we don't fill it back up again, right? And so, you know, I
And
thought
then
of
the
things
others
like,
stay empty.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
or again, you lose motivation to fill them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so I think for me, like, you know, the mind, like filling the cup of the mind, the body, and the athletics, like, that's a really important piece. But also the spirit. You know, for me, I'm not a
Hmm.
particularly religious person. However, for me, the spirit comes through charity. You know, and in my
Mm.
involvement at the time with
Yeah.
Mito Canada was a really important part of growth in me. And then
Hmm.
seeing other, how that builds the, you know, charity is helping others, altruism, that
I
type of
imagine
thing.
when you got your cancer diagnosis, spirit may have
Mm.
become, did you find that entered a little bit more then?
You know, it was super interesting. Like, you know, I don't think that I found, um, I found help through organized religion. Perhaps I don't think that really rang with
Oh,
me,
sorry. For
but
me, spirit is like just connection to the
totally,
universe. Like you out when you go running and you're
totally,
out in nature, I
yeah,
that to me, that's spiritual to me. Like when I'm walking
exactly,
or out, I mean, that's very, I feel very connected to my surroundings. I always
yeah,
have.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So I bet you
yeah.
that is something that that when I say spirit, it's not necessarily
Oh yeah.
religion. Yeah.
Exactly. That's kind of why I use the term spirit. Is that, like, for a lot of people, it's you know, religion, it's charity, it's
Hmm.
nature, it's
Yeah.
connection to the universe or whatever. But it, you know, something that's a little bit broader than the individual. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really important piece, and that's very individual from person to person. But I think another cup that's really important is passion. You know, and again, that's probably for me, is what makes you happy,
Yeah.
and doing as much of that as you possibly can.
But that's where your
Relationships.
embrace the suck
Mhm,
comes in because you can do
mhm.
something that's passionate, but nothing worth having comes easy. Like when you stand on that
Yeah,
podium, you might hate the training, but when you've completed a miler, what does that do for your psyche? What does that do for your self-trust, your self-reliance, your self-leadership? Guess what? And then you bite off the next big thing that you want to try because you're like, I've done that and I can do this
yeah,
too. And it's just, I think it's that confidence piece with athletes too. It's that belief. Don't be afraid to take the risk. Don't because you never know. Obviously, and it's feedback. If you fall on your face,
absolutely.
what did we learn from it? Moving on.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally, totally. And you
Right.
often, I mean, like I'm going through with the kids too, is like, my older boy just went through his first trade in the USHL, and it was a really interesting learning process,
Yeah.
and and like I don't know if there's really um, I mean, I just think that the message I was giving to with my kids with any challenge is like there's something to learn here. Like
Yeah.
even if you have a bad game or or whatever, you have a bad day or there's
Yeah.
always something to learn. And I think this just the reframing is really important rather than getting kind of locked in on it,
Yeah.
right?
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, and it's just the other things I just had was relationships as a cup. I think is really important to have that filled, and then for me is this improvement. Like I
Yeah.
just
Oh, you
I
can
put that.
tell.
I'm addicted to that.
You
Yeah,
are
yeah,
addicted. I mean, good
yeah,
thing to be addicted to. I will say, if you can
yeah.
be addicted to anything, it's personal growth and evolution. And I think for you, I interview there's a whole range of athletes, and I do believe, yes, we talk about life after sports, but you can get stuck if you're the one that's in the limelight and like you, to me, as much as I've always remembered you, Kyle, you never had a big ego. Maybe you did internally, but you didn't have a showboaty attitude. And you've got some athletes that have a bigger ego than others. When they get the fall off, the break is much larger, right? Because the ego's not being
Totally.
as stroked. You come from a very mentally challenging in terms of you were doing med school, so your focus is different versus like getting all the verbal external validation at the bar because you're the most
Totally.
popular captain on the team or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing to see the diversity in athletes, and it doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom left life after sports, but we have also lost some friends why this
Yep.
series started, that couldn't get past that piece. So it's just bringing awareness. I mean, Mark Mathod, I had him on here, and he's like,
Hmm.
we can't prepare you for when it happens in your journey.
Yeah.
But if we can enlighten you along the way, if we can provide some substance to help you develop yourself, help you develop the different parts that make you whole, the essence of Janine is always going to be Janine, but I identified with the hockey player. Then I was the business owner. Then I was this, and
Yeah.
it really defined me until I was able to take that step back. And that's what cancer gave me, that season of silence. So you've given us so much to think about, so many great nuggets. I'm stuck on the curiosity piece after this conversation too. It's really stuck out to me. It's actually funny. I have my I don't have one here, but my little keep showing up tokens, and on the back it says stay curious, keep listening. And that for me
Love it.
was stay curious and keep listening to those internal nudges. Where are they directing you? Because that's where your soul is curious and wants to go. And when you honor that, what happens? You become a lot more happier,
Yeah,
right?
and you often get a cool experience out of it too. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
exactly.
I probably should have said right off the bat, like my athletic career is nowhere near most of these people that you've had on this show, but I'm really appreciative of having me out here and
Once an
yeah,
athlete,
just put
always an athlete. But I think it's
yeah,
important, and that's from like because you're in
yeah,
a coaching position.
yeah.
Transitions happen at any age. Like I work with
Oh,
some
totally.
16-year-old gymnasts. Their
Yeah,
career is done. They started at like 4 and
yeah,
they did 6 hours a day till 14, 15. And guess what? Now
yeah,
the rug's being pulled out and they're lost.
yeah,
So I think it's important that we, as athletes, I mean, it can happen to any of us. Some
yeah,
are going to transition a lot harder. Some it'll hit you later in life because you go through something.
yeah,
For me, it was breast cancer that really kind of
yeah.
did that for me. I mean, I had lots of transitions along the way, but just you sharing your story, I'm so grateful to have you on the series. I can't believe episode 52 already.
Awesome.
Transitioning to life after sport. We've got Kyle McLaughlin here as we're wrapping it up. And I heard this on another podcast that I was interviewing. He's like, we've got to land the plane. So as we land the plane in this conversation, any last words other than maybe stay curious?
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you for the
I think
dispense.
I just, hey, thanks so much. I mean, I got nothing else to really plug. I think,
I thought you were going
I
to
think,
say I got nothing better to do today.
yeah,
No, I'm
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. No, I'm watching hockey today in
Yeah.
Fargo, but it's great. But no, but it's so great. I mean, and I think what you're doing is really, really important. It really matters. You're making an impact, and I mean, it's so good to see you as
Yeah,
well,
you
and
too.
absolutely love your family, and I think Lou and Sally have taught you and Brad, and the whole crew, lots of really important lessons. Lovely people. So you know where you get it from. But no, thanks for giving me the opportunity. This is a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Well, episode 52, everyone. Kyle McLaughlin on Tiger Talk Thursday, transitioning to life after sports.